Hello, everyone. This is Ashley Jackson. I'm here with Bill O'Kane. I just want to welcome everyone to our webinar, The Myth of Being Ready for MDM. Bill O'Kane is our former Gartner analyst and VP and MDM strategist, and he's going to walk you through the discussion today. He served for 8 years as Vice President of Data and Analytics at Gartner, and he's recognized as a thought leader, the world's foremost authority on the topics of information governance and MDM program management. And he's got a good topic to cover here with y'all. We're going to leave time at the end for questions. And if you have any issues with like audio or anything, just send a note in the chat and I will do what I can to help resolve any issues. So with that, Bill, take it away.
Thanks very much, Ashley. And in addition to, if you have a problem, if you have a question, please type it into the question window on the control panel. That would be great. And we'll try to get to them at the end. So today's sort of it wasn't a planned webinar for a long time. It arose as the result of a really expensive and deep market survey we did at Profisee around the holidays. And I've been doing this for a long time, as those of you that know me know. I didn't think I could really be surprised anymore, but it turns out that I can. So I'm going to do sort of a little bit of a rant, but we'll put some constructive stuff in there as well, and some action items that may help. So we did this expensive survey, and these guys were very smart, and they did a really good job. A lot of market insights they went to our clients, but also out to the broader market, and that's where this insight kind of came from. In fact, we got some humorous reactions when we presented them to some of our clients for their feedback, and I'll get to that. So the first thing what they came up with that pertains here, and I'll probably do some webinars on some of the other results that we got that were interesting as we move forward through the summer. But they came up with these top 2 reasons why people shy away from not implementing MDM, even though they know they need to. So it was kind of a series of questions. Yeah, we could probably get some benefit from that, but we're not doing it because. First one, I could have told them, this is pretty well known. Can't really connect business benefits to any outcomes that mean anything to the business or the people that would fund it for long enough to achieve those benefits. So, if you've been on these before, Profisee has a business impact roadmap framework that we do during the sales process as a cost of sale in order to help people build their, like it sounds, their roadmaps and their justifications for implementation. But the second one was a real sort of doozy for me. We're not ready because our data is not clean enough. And there were various flavors of this. It wasn't uniform, but I really had to dig into that. I took a lot of their time, going over individual responses and saying, that really surprises me because at the highest level, MDM is meant to address those things as a discipline and as a technology. And waiting till you start to address this, and I'm an old IT architect and data analyst and data quality person, and I know what they mean by do data quality cleanup, because again, I dug into the individual responses, and I'll talk more about that as we go through this. But this both, it overstates the value of things I used to do a lot, these sort of standalone data quality efforts that IT really initiates, and I'll talk about that some more, and does successfully. They do add some value, but it underestimates how much of that you could do as part of an MDM program as well. So in a sense, I'll come back to this at the end, you're never really going to be ready to do MDM. If you know you need to do it and you're holding off because of that, the chances are really good that the only way you're really going to do it is if a wheel falls off your business somewhere or a competitor leapfrogs you because they developed the capability and integrated in a way that gives them a digital transformation or competitive advantage. So again, we'll get to that a little more. So again, data quality is not a prerequisite for MDM. It's one of the benefits achieved by an effective implementation of MDM, but it's not the same thing the way people use those terms out in the field. And there are major differences and disconnects. There's nothing wrong with data quality projects. I've done many of them myself, but the scope tends to be far, far different from what you would do with an MDM discipline and program, and then subsequently probably MDM technology. But if you understand the differences, I'd very much like to see the next time we do the survey, I'd like to see that reason. It probably won't go away, but reason for not adopting MDM as a discipline or technology, I'd like to see that go way down the list. It just bothers me to no end. So please bear with me here. They're not the same thing. So I'm going to define my terms if it's okay with everybody. That's how. Um, I was trained to do things as an analyst, and I'm going to pursue that here as I think it's generally helpful to kind of make sure we're all talking about the same thing. I'm talking about, a data set that usually emanates from a business application or a table or two that sits in a data warehouse where someone says, this doesn't conform, the attribute values here, one or more, generally probably a couple, don't conform to the constraints we all know there should be. So I'm going to fix it. When I come in on a Saturday, I used to do this all the time, run some SQL, dump out some data, run some more SQL, clean it up, send it back, and start the application up again. And whatever reason that I did this tends to go away. And my favorite joke is then what I do is if I'm really forward thinking, and this is part of my issue with some of this, is I write on a Post-it to run that on the last day of every month. And I try to figure out a way to script it so that I don't have to come in on a Saturday. Nowadays, I would just do it from home, obviously. But, again, that's what's really going on here is, I see this is not supposed to be what it is. Maybe the business complained about a process or analytic problem that we know is caused by data in IT. So we're just going to fix it and everybody will be happy and we'll be heroes, maybe, if we're lucky, and then we'll move on. That's what I'm talking about here. It's really data set based, sort of intrinsic knowledge based, finite efforts. And I'm going to come back to that finite property in a couple of minutes. They're usually reactive. Like I said, somebody complains about something or I notice something that I think, best case, that I think might cause a problem and I decide to fix it, but it's not sort of a planned overarching, we're going to use the word project versus program a lot here. But they're usually related to specific issues. And again, generally IT kind of just picks up the ball and does it, which means they fund it. So again, may not think of it in terms of funding, but resources are funding, time is funding. So it usually involves expense. I like to say this. I use this sentence a lot as an analyst. How do I know whether what I'm doing is MDM or data quality? These things are projects that I'm talking about. They have a beginning, they have a middle, they have an end. Like I said, best case is somebody sticks a Post-it up that says, I need to do this again in a month or 6 months. And the key is here, I'm letting the data quality decay. And I'll use the term technical debt here. I'm purposely letting, or by default, letting technical debt accumulate until I have to pay it off again. What makes me pay it off? I don't know. It could be a time period. It could be this thing breaks again. It could be I get a project going that gets funded for next year. And then I get to start maybe on an the beginnings of an MDM program, but it's finite. So there are things that they don't do because of that finite property that they have generally. And again, I know there are data quality groups and organizations, but generally what I have found, and there are always exceptions, so please don't yell at me if you're one of them, but generally I found in the thousands of interactions I've had over the years, both at Gartner and Profisee, that the efforts generally break down into projects. They're things that are looked at in isolation. They generally, and this is probably the one where people would take the most exception, but I'm going to throw it out there just to get it out there. The best job I had in this realm of just standalone data quality, I actually sat next to the fellow that owned the biggest core operational system in the company. And when I had data quality problems, I would get up, walk around the wall and say, you have to fix this. And 9 out of 10 times he would do it because he liked me. Or I would buy him lunch or whatever it was, and he would do it. But that's not a program, right? That's a project, a set of projects. But I was a data quality person. And again, I added value, the efforts added value. I'm not saying they don't, but they're not a prerequisite to really tackling an MDM program head on. And I'll discuss it's usually a question of scope. And that's really what I want to tackle here. The other thing, and I've brought this up in other venues as a benefit of MDM, and I'll bring it up briefly here at the end because I have brought it up before. These data quality projects, because they're usually looking at a single app or maybe the integration between two apps, and that's a big stretch because that's usually when people start to do MDM, is when they tackle integration, which is really the other major part of what an MDM solution provides, is availability of trusted data, not just the quality. And I'll do a separate webinar on that probably over the summer, because that's the next misconception that I found is in these results. But generally, by virtue of the fact that we're looking at a single app or a single table or two in a data warehouse, we're looking at I'm going to overuse the term finite data model. I had a colleague at Gartner that used to like to say, the data problem exists because every business application out there acts like its data store is the system of record, but we all have multiple of them, so it can't be. So those two concepts can't coexist. The idea that your app is the system of record, but you have multiple apps with the same logical data in them that may or may not, and usually does, get treated differently. These projects generally don't tackle that unless somebody decides there needs to be, for example, some referential integrity in some database they built. Again, we're usually looking at a single thing that may or may not be malfunctioning or returning improper results, and we attack that and we fix it. Again, we fix it successfully. But that's usually the limit of what's going on. And again, you're looking at the data semantic within that environment only. In a real sense, you're not really tackling the fact that it's a silo. You're actually making that silo cleaner, which does generally improve whatever the situation is that's going on, but it doesn't give any incentive to resolve the multiple silos that you probably have. So again, that statement that we got back from the research firm that says that's a prerequisite kind of doesn't make any sense, because you're reinforcing the silos by doing that. Your business is actually probably going to be, if you think about it, less likely to fund something that spans multiple silos if theirs is getting fixed every time they ask for it on a finite basis. And lastly, probably the most obvious one, again, a question of scope. These projects generally don't address the siloed business processes. And again, I refuted that a little bit myself by saying, I had a guy next to me that I could get to fix his operational system pretty easily, but I left that company and it stopped happening. So again, that's the idea. It was finite and it stopped when I left. I didn't really have anybody to hand that stuff off to. So again, the business processes behind that stuff didn't change. The culture certainly didn't change, other than the fact that we had a new data warehouse that people thought was pretty cool. And we're willing to sacrifice quality for availability. If I can get at it, I don't care if it's 100% right, because I could never get at anything before. And it certainly didn't address larger data governance, which if you embark on an MDM program, as we'll see, it does. But again, you're really sort of in these siloed environs. And there's, again, I don't want to denigrate that. I just don't want to see it as a prerequisite for MDM, if that makes sense. And I hope it does. So again, just to recap a little bit, data quality efforts are generally standalone cleanup projects that IT either initiates or accepts accountability for, or both. Somebody who wants to do a good job says, I'm going to take this out, fix it, and put it back. And they're often batch oriented. And again, almost immediately the data starts to decay again because I either have to do it again in a month, or even if it's tomorrow night, and somebody sees something during the day, it might not be so great. So that's usually what they look like. Again, if you have one that doesn't, I applaud you. But generally, that's what I've seen over the years, and still today. By contrast, MDM is an ongoing program. Embeds data quality rules across different data models. I kind of beat that to death on the last slide. Data semantics, analytics, and business process. And it also enables generally real-time access to trusted data. So Profisee, for example, has a services layer that it ships with. A lot of MDM tools do. And the idea is so that once you get that quality and trust, more critically, you can get better availability to the data from business apps and from analytics platforms. So again, the idea of an ongoing program. Now, what I want to say here as well, in case I don't touch on it later, is this question of scope also involves the attribute scope that you're attacking. So when I would do data quality projects, and most of the people I've talked to that do this, they look at the entire data set that they're looking at. There might be one or two things that drove them to do it, but they're probably going to take a look. The more conscientious they are, the more likely this is to happen. They're going to look across this data set and see what else doesn't conform to constraints. That's the easiest one. I'm only supposed to have 5 values in this table, in this column, and my profiler, or the SQL I wrote, because I don't have a profiler, tells me there's 25 values. I'm going to take a look at that and see if I can grind it down, and hopefully I don't break anything by doing it. And I may enlarge the scope of my project a little bit, but again, it's still going to have all those beginning, middle, and end characteristics. Eventually, I'm going to finish. That's great, but that takes a lot of time. In MDM, especially in the world of multi-domain MDM, our philosophy at Profisee in particular, and one of the reasons I came here a year ago is, look, follow the Gartner advice of just pull out the attributes you need to achieve the outcomes you want, model those, and then increment the model as you release more versions of your MDM solution to address more and more requirements. So think of concentric circles expanding outward with more and more data attributes involved. But don't do everything at first, because this is a program. It's going to keep going. You're going to get a chance. If there's an outcome that needs that attribute, and it's worth doing, and that's critical, as all of you know, we're big proponents of business cases here. If your business case begins to reference something, it's going to get done. That's the idea. You're not mastering a bunch of master data attributes that no one's ever going to look at. I like to throw the number around as an analyst. I would ask architects that were highly successful at this in terms of MDM and data governance. Say, when you first started, before we all knew how to do this, what percentage of attributes, master attributes, got used? And they would usually say, 40 to 60%, meaning 40 to 60% could have been left at the side of the road, and no one would have known the difference on the consumption side, the business side. So again, people got smarter over the years, and this was advice I gave a lot as an analyst. Look, just model the stuff that's going to get you to the outcomes you need. And if you don't know what the outcomes you need are, go back to the business case thing and use a framework like Profisee's Business Impact Roadmap and get to it, because you might even think you're attacking the right thing, and there's something that's even more valuable that would be easier to do. For example, that's what we mean by roadmap in our Business Impact Roadmap. But that's the idea, is make sure you're attacking the right outcomes. And again, if you don't know what those outcomes are, and I don't think I cover it here, but the 4 suspects for masquerading as business outcomes when they're not are better data quality, better decisions, single version of the truth, and 360 view, usually of the customer. If that last one is your business case, your risk has gone way up, because that's actually a strategy. That's a way to get to something else. So if I were to give that to you tonight, what would you do tomorrow, kind of thing. So just think about that. We have other things on our website. I did a whole webinar on that, so I won't belabor it here. But again, that's part of it, is just model to achieve the business outcomes. Don't attack whole data sets necessarily, unless there's a good reason to do that, and usually there isn't. So we talked about what data quality is. I just kind of want to summarize the difference here. MDM is an ongoing program. It's not a project. It's, if you will, if you want to think in terms of projects, it's an interconnected series of projects that not only involve IT, they involve the business, signing them up for governance. This is not a governance pitch, so I won't go deeply down that, but that's down that road. But that's one of the differences here that we would definitely like to cover. So it focuses on those master data elements, as I said, that will benefit the business in the most timely manner. So again, we want to concentrate on those before we do anything else. Now, here's the other thing, and we're really going to get sort of into the technology here. Most MDM solutions, if not all of them, can trap the data quality rules that you need that you uncover while you're doing these things. So that's the other thing. Generally, when someone says, "Oh, I need to do some data quality cleanup before I can talk to you," my question to them is, do you have a place to put those business rules that you learn, even if it's SharePoint? Do you have a place? And I usually get crickets in response to that, meaning, no, I'm just going to fix this thing and then I'm going to do my next thing because I'm really busy. MDM tools actually facilitate that. And in Profisee's case in particular, our price point is so low compared to some of the other vendors that it's not 7 figures. It may not, depending on your implementation, be high 6 figures, and we don't charge by domain. So that idea of modeling only what you need and doing data quality work with it from a financial perspective becomes attractive. One of the reasons when I left Gartner that I came to Profisee was that I used to make the argument all the time at Gartner. If all you want to do is sort of analytical MDM from a data warehouse, then you probably shouldn't spend the money on an MDM tool because you're never going to really access that real-time capability for availability that would make that pay. Profisee kind of shot a hole in that argument, not kind of, they did, because the price point was so reasonable that it was along the lines of one of the big guys' data quality offerings, or all the big guys' data quality offerings. So saying it was more expensive to do MDM became no longer true when I was talking about Profisee. So again, I talked about data models before. MDM addresses those discrepancies. One of the first things you want to do as a governance organization is something called semantic reconciliation. So you know, that's the first step in a really robust governance process is, for example, what's the definition of a customer? Do I really only have one kind of customer? That goes back to that models within business applications thing again. I have multiple applications. They all act like they're the system of record for customer, but they can't be, because the implicit definition of customer is different slightly, subtly, or not so subtly across them. MDM is the vehicle that says, in effect, and I don't want to scare anyone, none of these applications can be the system of record, because none of them accurately reflect my business 100%. So I need a place to build a model that actually does, and that's what MDM will do. So I might find, for example, I may not be able to get to a single definition of customer. I might find out, we really have 3 types. I'm going to actually subtype customer within my MDM model to reflect that. And I'm going to make sure that maps out to all the business applications and back that it needs to. But now I'm actually telling the truth from a data model perspective. This is really how we do things. And I can change, or attempt to start to change, the business vocabulary that says, you can't just say customer to me. I need to know which of the 3 types it is, so that you and I don't end up comparing 2 spreadsheets later and wasting a whole day trying to figure out why they don't match. That's one of the biggest reasons, is differences in semantics. Everyone did the right thing on their end, but their ends are different. And I think a lot of people here have probably experienced that. Lastly, there's that interdependency between MDM and data governance. If you're really going to tackle this problem and get the business involved and get it funded from where it should be funded from, and the ownership, I don't like to use that word, but let's say stewardship, rest the stewardship, what most people mean when they say data ownership, within the business and not IT, so that technical debt gets worked on, gets whittled down, and eventually gets eliminated where it's appropriate. Not all your attributes have the same criticality. I think anybody here would agree with that. And again, think in terms of those concentric circles, the core being the master attributes that everybody needs to be trusted, and then working out from there to sort of lesser degrees of stringency. But again, I don't think anybody here would make the argument that I can get a really good data governance organization and process going that involves the business by showing them a bunch of data quality projects, even if the results are good. I used to try that all the time. Back in the 90s, it never really worked for me. That's why I was so happy when MDM came along, and I was lucky enough to get on one of the first programs in 2001, because the other way just didn't get to that state that I think all of us that our data enthusiasts know needs to be gotten to get real business value from data. So just briefly in closing, MDM solutions capture those business rules. If you want to do data quality projects, an MDM tool with a reasonable price point like Profisee can certainly play the role of the repository for your data quality rules. And then when you really tackle the cross-semantic, cross-model, process-based, analytics-based issues or opportunities, if they're not issues, maybe it's a new capability you want to have that you could never do before, you'll be ready. You can do it in the same platform, same service layer, same user interfaces, all of that can be done right there. So again, I really don't want to make data quality projects go away. I'm under no illusions about that. I think they're valuable. I just don't want to see them be the prerequisite to doing MDM, especially since most of the organizations that say this have known they've needed to do the DQ part for years and just haven't done it. And I don't, in a sense, I don't know what they're waiting for, I guess, to be blunt. MDM solutions are designed to be integrated with these apps and platforms directly, so that you not only get things clean, you can keep them clean. You can actually have your application UIs check for duplicates. For example, we do that all the time with CRM and ERP systems. We sit behind them and we make sure that duplicates don't get created, or if attributes need to be updated, you already know who I am, but you have the wrong postal address or email address, we give you the opportunity to maintain that data in those applications, and you can decide that application is still the system of record, or you can say MDM is a system of record with the same set of software. It doesn't really matter. And the last one is just to sort of repeat that governance thing at the end. We even have clients that, we're not a data governance solution per se, but we have clients that manage their metadata catalogs in Profisee, and that's their entire catalog. So you can treat metadata like master data, and some or a lot of that metadata can describe non-master data. But if you treat the metadata itself like master data, you can do a catalog inside Profisee, for example. We just had a customer advisory board at the end of last year, and we had 2 customers that had done it independently with no guidance from us, even though we are capable of guiding people to do that. So again, if governance is on your radar screen, you're going to have to do this anyway. If the one of the major barriers is, geez, the tool's going to cost me $1.5 million, and then I'm going to need another 2 million to implement it. What I'm saying here is that's not always the case. There are tools like Profisee that are so cost effective, both from a software and services perspective, that they can be considered earlier in your thinking than a formal kickoff of an MDM program where you go to the business and tell them that you're signing them up. So right just before we take some questions, this is sort of a humorous conversation we had with our clients when we found this out from the survey we did. They said, they don't feel like they're ready to do MDM. And the first thing a couple of people said to me was, well, that's like being ready to have children. Like no one's ever ready to do that. And MDM is the same way, or any sort of major life event. If you wait until you're 100% ready, you're not going to do it. And I heard that from multiple people independently. So I just thought it was interesting, kind of humorous thing to relate that, that's the first thing out of everybody's mouth is that's like waiting to get married till you're ready, or to have children, or do anything else that's a sort of a major event. And again, we get a lot of people approaching us to say, I want to digitally transform myself, but I'm not ready to do MDM. Well, the ones that have transformed themselves, that maybe your competitors, didn't wait. They did what I'm saying. They formulated a bunch of outcomes, possibly with our help, justified them, quantified them, and attacked them, data modeled them, and then attacked them from an MDM perspective. And now they're up and running, and they're adding attributes every 6 months. And more importantly, they're adding outcomes every 3 to 6 months. I think in Gartner's last Magic Quadrant, which I did not have involvement with because I was already gone, Profisee had the highest number of sub 3 month implementations, so able to deliver value in less than 3 months. And there are a lot of reasons for that, but it is sort of ease of use. But that's the idea: is deliver value early, and then deliver more value and more value and more value. And that's another reason it's a program and not a project, because I don't want to say you're never going to be done. There will be some critical mass achieved at some point, but there's really no finish to this. You can keep getting benefits on and on into the foreseeable future generally. So I want to stop there because we do have a couple of questions. I want to, so first question is, how do you approach MDM in the case where there's multiple legacy systems? And again, that's sort of the sweet spot for MDM. But what I would say is this: I'm going to answer this in 2 ways. The first one is on the technical side, and it's almost easier, is to identify. You need to do that semantic modeling. It's the idea of, none of these systems I have, they all want to act like the system of record for, I'm going to use customer. But it could be product data, it could be supplier, it could be any of the typical master data domains. They want to be the system of record, they just can't. Because again, there are just different semantics out there that they have no awareness of. And anybody that's ever integrated 2 systems directly to each other, 2 business applications, and gotten in trouble later knows this. So the idea is to sit down before you touch a keyboard and start coding anything, and figure out, what is a customer in this organization? What is this? What attributes does it have? I often tell people to use the tool of an XML schema design. Try to build an XML schema, because later on, if you build something like an enterprise services bus or a really tightly managed ETL, this is going to have value for you anyway. So try to build an XML schema that's canonical, and it's a fancy word, that's far-reaching inside your organization, that everybody agrees is the definition of what a customer is, and then map all these apps to it. So that's the technical side, and we're only talking about master data. So data that's slowly changing and widely shared, not transactional in nature, but could have MDM on it or master data on it. That's the technical side. The other side is, in the business side, I address this based on the culture of the organization I'm dealing with. But the most common thing I advise people is, don't position MDM to the business people that have to own governance. Position whatever the outcomes are. I spoke in front of 60 CIOs in Phoenix back in December. It was a really great session. And I got this question, and my answer was, because they were CIOs, if you looked at a bunch of architectural stuff going on and you decided, and your architectural team decided that you needed an enterprise service bus for whatever reason, and we all know there are good reasons to have one in most organizations, but and to manage it, not just to govern and manage it. But would you go and tell your business that? And of course, they all said no. And I said, well, the only reason you want to do that with data is because you think they understand its value, and they don't. And honestly, they don't really need to if you position this right. It should take the form of, again, what are your outcomes? New onboarding process that doesn't create duplicate customers, because duplicate customers mess us up downstream. Eventually end up with sales reps and service reps calling the same customers, and we don't look very smart. And technically, there's no way to stop that if we don't put in a system that can see those duplicates. If not eliminate them, at least see them and call them out, but hopefully eliminate them. So that's on the business side, is what's going to happen when I do this? Because this is going to take multiple budget cycles. You will deliver value quickly with a tool like ours, and generally, but the big value comes strategically. Is that real-time sort of service-driven access from all these apps and from all these analytics platforms to MDM. So I hope that answers the question. So there's a technical side to it, which does involve semantic reconciliation. There's no silver bullet for that, really. I used to make a lot of jokes about, being able to do some automated semantic discovery. Like, if I could do that, I probably wouldn't need to do MDM. But again, that's the technical side, and the other side is the business side. And it really means don't position MDM to the business at all unless you have to. Position the outcomes and let them worry about that. Where does the data catalog or business glossary fit in? So the way the industry describes those, I would say, good question, is as part of data governance, the larger discipline of data governance. I don't necessarily disagree with that. I would go back, however, and say, depending on what your requirements are, we have clients, for example, that do catalogs in our MDM tool, and the catalogs don't have what they describe doesn't have to be limited to master data. It can only enforce the rules against master data because that's the data that's stored in our tool, but it can describe and publish metadata about other things, like a transactional system. Because if you think about it, metadata, it's not real. Some people say metadata is master data. I disagree with that as a picky architect, but it has the same physical characteristics. It changes slowly. It needs to be shared widely. So it looks and smells like master data, and to a large extent, I can manage it in an MDM tool, such as Profisee, for example. And we have clients that showed up to our advisory board that said, yeah, I do that all the time. What's the matter with you? So again, that's generally where it fits. They're generally considered part of data governance as a larger discipline. But again, if that's what you need to do, there are sort of lower scoped or more modestly scoped solutions that can do it. And again, I've actually told people I had a very effective data catalog for Y2K, and I did it in SharePoint. It's just maintaining it, having an administrator that's responsible for it, having people have access to it so they can consult it. And that's the first time I did a catalog, was as part of Y2K, to lower calls from programmers to a help desk. So I hope that's helpful. Is the goal of MDM to create a golden record? So it depends on the implementation style of MDM. There are 4. If you're doing a registry style MDM, which is not too popular outside of healthcare anymore, where it still is popular, that's not a system of record, but it does require MDM to do it generally, if you're going to do a good job. Consolidation style MDM can create a golden record, but it's generally not considered the system of record. And then you move to sort of centralized and coexistence. And I think if there's interest, we may do an implementation styles webinar in the near future, because that is the trajectory of implementation that most people like to follow in order to get eventually to that huge transformational value. It involves starting in a less invasive style and moving into more invasive styles as we go along. So I hope that's helpful. That's a big topic to cover here. So somebody's asking, there are a couple of questions here that are sort of similar, and they're good. Another big topic, how does this get organized? Or I'm going to use a word that nobody here used, and Microsoft spell checker doesn't like it. How does it get operationalized? How does it become a real sort of operational function in the business? Hopefully, as you move along. So I'll sort of answer this question sideways and say, usually people say, well, where's the money come from? If in fact I have business entities, none of whom see the total value of MDM or what it is I'm trying to do, they don't really care about getting the onboarding process cleaned up. The onboarding people do, but nobody else does, and it's really expensive. And even though all these other people are going to get benefit from it, I can't really sell it to them because it wouldn't justify it. The little bit the rest of them would get, it's really there, and they don't want to pay for it in terms of customer service and onboarding. So that's another thing that sort of speaks to the creation of a data governance unit. I believe data governance virtual organizations have a budget, and they do the good of the nation stuff where I see the total value across all the silos, but by nature of my organization, the thing that created these problems is that separation, and that separation is going to continue to create a problem as an inhibitor to people spending money to get these things optimized. And that may not mean totally fixed or totally cleaned up, but I believe the governance organization has a budget, is a real thing. It has priorities. It has a meeting maybe every couple of months. That seems to be the optimal frequency in a mature organization. And they go over priorities, and they have action items, and they do PMP kind of stuff to keep things going. That's another one of my favorite questions, is when will I be done with data governance? And the answer is never. When will you be done with procurement? Never. I mean, it's sort of the same, and the same level of criticality. So again, another big topic. I hope that sort of Reader's Digest version is helpful. So does MDM live upstream or downstream? It can live in either place. Again, there are 4 styles. 2 of them are kind of downstream and 2 are upstream. Actually, 2 are downstream, 1's in the middle and does both, and the last one is upstream. And again, that may be the topic for a whole webinar. How would you proceed if there's been no data analysis done at all? And the answer is, again, by outcome. The answer for me is always going to be, I'm sure there are people that have wanted to smack me over the years. Don't clean up your data and don't capture metadata for the sake of doing it. What is the outcome supposed to be? And then focus on those data elements and sources that will get you there and nothing else. I know it's really tempting to want to clean up data that's next to the stuff that you really need, and that speaks to your conscientiousness, but that's usually what sinks these things is, lack of focus on the exact outcome that the business is going to get excited about. And it usually isn't just one, it's 2 or 3, but that's the key. When these things fail, it's not technology. It can be politics, but it usually isn't. It's this idea that they just die under their own weight. I run out of services money because I spent too much on MDM software. And again, with Profisee, we have that problem less. But again, it's running out of money before I could actually get something on the table that somebody could see and use. Even though I cleaned up a whole bunch of stuff, there's really nothing that the business is still excited about. Does Profisee run on-prem or in the cloud? It runs in both. We are imminently releasing a completely containerized version of the product that runs the same. It's the same code in the cloud or on-prem. We are a pretty tight Microsoft partner, so we do focus a little bit on Azure, but we can run, in the other and do run in the other platforms. But again, we're heavily concentrated on Microsoft. Is there a limitation on data volume? So I'll do a commercial for Profisee here, if that's okay. As far as I know, we are the only vendor that only charges by number of attributes and number of records total. What that means is we don't charge separately by domain. We don't charge per record separately by domain. So our base is, and I don't know what the dollar amount is off the top of my head, but our entry level is 250 master attributes and 500,000 records, source records. And a lot of our clients never have to come back and give us any more money outside of maintenance if they're perpetual, or just to keep paying their subscription. Until you go over 250 attributes and 500,000 rows, you don't have to talk to us. It doesn't matter if they're product data, customer data, supplier data, location, whatever. The alternative to that is you define 25 customer data attributes, and while you're doing this, like a lot of people, you figure out I need 10 product data attributes to be cleaned up to fulfill this use case. Well, that's another domain. And that can be another product, it can be another license. With us, it is not. And as far as I know, that attributes-based pricing model is unique. Somebody finds another one, great, but because I think that's really a fair way to do it. It gauges value, but it doesn't penalize you for traversing domains in order to deliver defined outcomes. Okay. Have you had people tell you they're using an ERP, they don't need an MDM solution because their ERP is so good? I have had people tell me that dozens of times. Some of them were actually correct. Usually when that's correct, it's because they developed manual data entry processes. And I used to tell people sometimes MDM is a 5-page data entry procedures document. And the first thing it says is don't create duplicates. So if that works for you, great. But what I would say is generally when it works, it obsoletes itself because it causes your business to grow. If you get good at this and you're really running smoothly, you're probably growing. If you're not, there are going to be other problems fairly shortly. But if you are, eventually you will have growth to the point where that way of doing it doesn't work. So in a sense, usually you're manually checking for duplicates. You're doing a search yourself before you create a new record. And if that works, great. My guess is that it won't. And eventually, or somebody will put in a CRM system that doesn't agree with your ERP, and you try to do a direct point-to-point integration, and that doesn't work too well because the object models are different between those two things, the ERP and the CRM. So again, I have seen people say that. They've said it about CRM, which is usually less true than ERP, because ERP usually has better defined processes, but usually it doesn't scale. So in a sense, if you're successful, it won't be good anymore after a while, and you'll need an automated way to do it. The good news is you've probably manually defined all your data quality rules over the years to keep that ERP in that pristine state. So we'll have a basis of rules to work from, even if they're just typed on a piece of paper virtually or physically. So again, I have had people say that. Some of them were telling the truth, some of them weren't. And again, it also depends on perspective. It may be doing the job for one set of users and not for another. You may not be able to use it for analytics at all. So a couple on business case time horizons. So usually, I'll answer that at two levels. How long it takes us to do a business impact roadmap depends on the people at the other side of the table. If they devote themselves to it completely, it's usually a couple of business weeks. If they don't, it's however long it takes them to get back to us, or they have to, again, the target has to participate in the process, both business and IT, in cases where you want really far reaching into the future insight and analysis. So that's one. It can be as short as 2 weeks. It can take longer. We have people that do half of it and then decide to buy our software and they want to stop. They don't want to do anymore because they convince themselves by doing half the process. I'm not a big fan of that because usually they end up coming back to complete it later. Or sometimes they do it themselves, but it does happen. The other way I'm going to interpret that question is how long does it take to deliver business value? It depends. I will say usually it has to do with analytics, not operational MDM, because that just takes longer to train people, and there's going to be a new pop-up window that's going to take a while for them to get used to before they actually ramp up their productivity using it, something like that. So usually analytics is the place to start because it's not as invasive, and people can see more of the data that way and get to trust it before it gets put into operational scenarios. But we very often deliver value in less than 3 months, and we were actually cited by Gartner for that in the last Magic Quadrant specifically. That's one of the questions they ask now in their surveys. And finally, I'm going to close off with this one because it's pretty simple. Does Dynamics 365, Microsoft Dynamics 365 have native MDM? As far as I know, no, it does not. That's why we have such a tight partnership with Microsoft. And for those that don't know, initially, Profisee's predecessor was a company called Strateger, and Strateger actually sold MDS to Master Data Services to Microsoft. And then Profisee was the platform that was built as a spinoff independently to use MDS. We no longer are based on MDS. We're not limited by it. Microsoft's not porting MDS to Azure, so the foundations of the tool have been brought into the mainstream. So again, we're not dependent on that. But Microsoft still brings us into a lot of situations where there's an MDM requirement around Dynamics 365. So they can be made to validate data in kind of a linear scalar way, like any CRM or ERP. Last name has to be, or customer name has to be at least two bytes or 1 byte, but those are scalar and linear. They're not going to look at other systems to see what they should do for best email address, for example. That's what MDM does. So again, I would say no. And that's another reason Microsoft deals with us so tightly, is because they don't really, and I won't speak for them, but I think they see that as a partner capability rather than something that they want to develop for themselves. And again, the history of MDS is a pretty good indicator there, I think. So I hope that's helpful. I want to thank everybody in this time. I know we're all in challenging times. We got a really big turnout today. So in spite of the fact that I had never seen the issue of being ready from a data quality perspective to do MDM, apparently it touched a nerve. So I'm glad we did this. And again, don't hesitate to contact Profisee if you want to explore this impact roadmap idea further, or how we might be of help along these lines to your organization. And with that, I'm going to thank everybody and hand it back to Ashley to close out. Actually, Ashley may be on mute, or we may have actually lost her. So I will close it out. Thanks everybody for attending. Stay safe out there, and we'll see you at the next webinar very soon. Thank you.